Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here on the 28th of January 2025. Thank you for tuning in. Uh, what do we got going on out there in the world? We got a lot going on. You guys ever heard the Trump? He is really shaking up the world right now. He's doing a lot of things out there very, very quickly. One of the things applies right here to Canada, you know, and there's Doug Ford. He says about Trump and what Trump's planning here in Canada. He says hit back twice as hard. Canada's number one populace has a risky Trump strategy. And it almost seems to me like the rest of Canada, or the rest of the political structure in Canada, is kind of following the similar strategy of retaliatory measures against the tariffs that Trump plans on putting in. But Trump tariffs are coming in with a plan. Trump has a plan for his tariffs. Believe it or not, I mean this thing's come out of the blue, and it's actually a little bit hard to get your head around, for me anyway, to get my head around. The plan is to actually make Canada a state of the United States of America. And he's already laid out his plan on how he's going to do this. Trump is, and he's going to hit Canada hard, and he's financially. He's going to use financial tactics, but Canada is talking now about fighting back and hitting twice as hard back. This could start an all-out trade war between the United States and Canada. As hard as that is to believe, because we've been allies for so long, uh, any kind of a war, even a trade war, is a little bit hard to imagine. But what's the ramifications for the United States? Can Canada get out of becoming the 51st state? Becoming a state of the United States? In other words, America absorbing them. Well, there's this term. It's going to last 4 years long, the Trump term administration. I don't see them backing off from their plans for the next 4 years at the very least. So that means Canada would have to, in order to resist this plan, Canada would have to keep up their resistance for the full 4 years of this term to when policies change in the next term. But can Canada survive 4 years of economic tariffs and a trade war against the United States of America when the United States of America is Canada's biggest trading partner? Can they survive 4 years of that? Because America is looking to turn Canada into the 51st state. And so they've made their decision basically here. They're going to fight against it instead of capitulate. What does that actually mean for Canada? Well, we're going to have to wait and see. But what will the tariffs do? What will happen if they get in a trade war with their largest trading partner? Could it put Canada into the state of being in a depression? Could it cause a depression? Here, not a recession, but a depression. And Canada is so over leveraged financially. Real estate here is at an all-time high. This is all part of the leveraging. Go try to buy a house someplace in the west coast of Canada, or a piece of property. You pay, a guy's got an acre piece of land, a building lot, just a plain old building lot out in the western part of Canada, and they want like $2 million for it, $5 million for it. Of course, that's in Canadian dollars. But it's still worth about 70% of American dollars. So it's still an exorbitant amount of money. So if they want like 3-4 million, it's still like 2 million Canadian, be 1.4 million American. So yeah, it's I'm rambling off the subject a little bit, but let's get back on track. Trump is really shaking things up. Deportation flights from the United States. Colombia's president says the government won't accept any deportation flights from the United States. Colombian President Gustav Petro on Sunday said that his government would not accept flights carrying migrants deported from the United States until the Trump administration creates a protocol. And then there's what's going on in Mexico. I'm telling you, really shaking things up. Is it for the good? Is it for the better? The things that are happening? I really do believe that Trump's an exceedingly powerful man. I mean, a lot of people, they look at Trump and they don't see it. They see his. I mean, I was watching him dance yesterday on an old video that come from Soul Train, back when Trump must have been about 20 years old, 30 years old. Boy, he was thin, very, very thin. And he was dancing this dance from the 1980s, a dance I've never seen before, honest to goodness. You guys can look it up. Just put in Trump on Soul Train or whatever, you know. And it was a wild dance he was doing. He's a different kind of man, and a lot of people don't see that side of his character where he's a natural born leader. Quite seriously, and these other countries in the world recognize it immediately when he stepped back into office. See, the power was taken away from him when he lost the presidency, and the presidency slipped away. That power slipped away for 4 years. Now the power's back. He's won the presidency back again. He's in the spot of power. He's in the seat of power. And he's a very special man, but he's very, very hard to put into words, to tell you the truth. You just look through the news and you see all the news articles for the last, I don't know, going back even before the Trump presidency. All around the world, they talk about Trump, 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 all the news articles. If I were to go through the news articles right now, just look through, half of them have got Trump's picture on them. There's something he's doing. He's a trailblazer, for one thing, you know. Kind of like, you know how the trailblazers used to work, like in the jungle or whatever. You'd get some guy and he'd have a machete and he'd blaze the trail through the jungle so everybody else could follow. So he blazes the trail, everybody else follows it. And that's what's happening right now. He's blazing a trail. Where this trail's going to lead, well, we'll have to wait and see. But he's got a tremendous amount of charisma. I tell you honestly, there's never quite been a man like him. He is, when they made him, they broke the mold. Anyway, let's move on. U.S. halts all foreign aid, including Ukraine. This has just happened. This is Trump again. U.S. halts all foreign aid, including Ukraine. Big moves are being made in the world stage out there so fast now that Trump's in, that these other countries, you know, they were all planning on ready to go to war and everything else, and the war between Iran and Israel, and war between Putin and Ukraine, and war. They're all stopped, and they're all sitting there watching what the U.S. is going to do right now. They're kind of holding their guns back just a little bit for a little while just to see how this is all going to pan out. So, even though Trump's not in charge of their countries and stuff, the power of him coming back into office is having an effect upon the entire world right now. It's incredible. And it's having a large effect, too. Surprising. But that's it. Now, what's Putin thinking of that? The United States is going to haul all foreign aid to Ukraine. Of course they're going to stop what they're doing over there and want to see how all this pans out in these other countries like China and Russia and everything. They're going to stop for a minute or two and say, hey, what's he doing? And how's that going to affect what we're doing? Let's wait and see what he does to see what we're going to do. It's throwing them all off balance right now, just for a little period of time. Trump suggests his plan for Gaza Strip is to clean out the whole thing. Whatever that means. It says President Donald Trump indicated Saturday that he had spoken with the King of Jordan about potentially building housing and moving more than 1 million Palestinians from Gaza to neighboring countries, a remarkable proposal for the sitting U.S. president. Ain't that something? Spoken with the King of Jordan about potentially building housing and moving more than 1 million Palestinians from Gaza. Talking millions of people here. How many houses would they have to build? You know? As you can imagine, though, the Palestinians, if they built a brand new house, and they've went from what they're living in now into living into a new house that's just been built. What a change in their life that would be. And no bombs dropping anymore. What a change in their life. What that would be. It's like a 90-degree turn it would make for people if they are not living in rubble and they're actually living in a home. Just saying, Now the fires out in California right now. They're getting them out now. But all last week they were dumping this red toxic dye everywhere. But they had to. They had to. Flame retardant. It was coming out of the airplanes. It was everywhere. How much of that flame retardant did they dump? Gosh only knows. The government said that they're paying for all of the firefighting, I guess. So all the flame retardant, they paid for it and everything else. But what about the homes and stuff? I don't think they're going to pay. They're not going to pay for the rebuilding, are they? What's going on? The insurance companies. This could wipe out. Big insurance companies could get wiped out and stuff like this because those mansions are worth so much money that burned. Honest to God. So they got rain on the way. This is a good sign that all the fires are probably going to start. But fires don't last forever, Like last week I was telling you guys about a fire I went through when I was a kid. That thing burnt like 25. The fire I was talking about to you guys burnt like 25,000 acres. So it was as big as these fires in California. It was like 6 miles one way and about 6 miles the other way. It burnt. An area that big, 6 miles across the fire zone. That Florida fire that happened about 40 years ago when I was a kid. It was actually more like 50 years ago when I was a kid. And so it was a big fire too, but they used to get those big fires down in Florida back in those days, back in the 1970s and stuff, and in the dry season. A funny thing, I'm going to stray off the topic just for a minute, I'll tell you a funny thing about Florida in the dry season, made me think of this, is there's dirt roads in Florida. Back when I was a kid, there was dirt roads everywhere, running through the brush everywhere in Florida, And the funny thing about all up north, when you got a dirt road, when it rains a lot, you get mud and mud holes, and the car might get stuck on a dirt road if it's raining muddy and it's muddy weather. That in the north, but Florida's funny. It's different. The roads are on sand, and when you get rain, the funny thing is the roads pack right down and hard like asphalt. They're beautiful to drive on when they're wet. But when you get the dry season down in Florida and everything gets bone dry, that sand gets dry, and that's when it gets so it'll trap your car. Not like in the northern roads. When they get wet, they trap your car. That's just exactly the opposite. When they get dry, those Florida roads turn into powder. The sand does. It's like sugar, and your car will sink to China. I remember driving through those dirt roads in Florida, and you seen a patch up ahead in the wintertime during the dry season in Florida when they get their fires. You see a patch of this dry sand up ahead? And if you're a driver that's driven there for a long time, you know exactly what to do. You get some speed on, and you kind of coast across it. Don't slow down whatever you do. Because if you slow down, you're going to sink to China. I mean, your car will sink right down to the axles, and it's the hardest stuff to get. You can't get traction. Absolutely impossible. It's hellish to get your car out of it. It's just like being caught in quicksand with your whole car. Imagine getting a person out of quicksand. Imagine getting a car out of quicksand. If I get a little bit of time, I'll just tell you guys a story. When I was a young guy, I used to have a temper, and my mother did something to me. I can't remember what it was, but she did something to trigger my temper. And I went out and I got in my car, and I had a powerful car. It had a 400 horsepower. It was an old muscle car. It was a muscle car from the 1970s. A 440 cubic inch engine. Uh, had what they call a six pack on there, and it had about 400 horsepower. And I got in that thing and I revved her up, and I went squealing down that old dirt road. And there was a corner, you know, and I slid. I lost control of the car. The car had so much power. It was kind of like those cars they got now. They've got a lot of cars, especially down in the states, and you hear them racing down the drag racing down the streets. What are they? Dodge Challengers and stuff like that. This was kind of like that back in the day, and so I lost control of the thing. You know, I mean, it had a positive traction rear end, and it had of 400 horsepower, and it's easy to lose control of a big powerful car like that, especially on a dirt road. Slid off the road and to the side and landed in a patch of that sugar sand. Didn't hurt the car any, but the car sank. She just sank. She was right in it. She was right in a patch of like quicksand. And so I spent the rest of the afternoon in that hot sun with jacks, what's called come-alongs, which are hand winches, cables, chains, and I spent like 2 hours getting that car out of that patch of sand. The car only weighed like 6,500 pounds. It was a big car. Those old Dodge Roadrunners and stuff, they were awful heavy. The thing is after it was over and I got the car all out, you know, I learned a lesson from that. Not to lose your temper. You know, I've never lost my temper since then. Ever. You know, I learned that taught me a lesson that it hurt me more than it hurt anybody else because I had to do all that work to get that car out, you know. Anyway, so they got all this red flame retardant that's running into the streams and rivers and everything else, toxic ash, but there's not just a toxic ash from the flame retardant. You know, plastics people have inside their houses and stuff, all kinds of stuff people have that's all toxic when it burns. So all of these houses and stuff, the sites, could all be considered toxic sites. Let's get in there and take a look at the markets today. You know, silver's at 30.54. Excuse me. I got the hiccups. I just got them. Wonder if I can get over them before the show ends. 30.54 for silver. I just felt a big lump in my throat. That's generally when the hiccups leave you, is when you feel that lump in your throat, kind of like. That's what was causing it. It's a muscle spasm. So silver's at 30.54. Silver has not seen the big leap in price, and neither has gold, but they serve the same practical purpose as Bitcoin, except that at any rate, they're real and tangible, and in this world, and Bitcoin's not. It's not real and tangible. You can't hang on to a Bitcoin. You can't hold it. You know, it's interesting, though, because in the early days of Bitcoin, they did make a Bitcoin that was tangible and you could hold on to. It was a coin, and it had the number on it that you could hold the coin, and the whole coin held a Bitcoin, one Bitcoin that was attached to the coin by a number that the Bitcoin had on it. It was the, what do they call that number? Private key. So the Bitcoin coin came with a private key to a Bitcoin. They used to have that when Bitcoin first started. They were attaching it to the physical world. And even though it it's in the metaphysical world. Bitcoin is a metaphysical thing. You can't put your hand on it. It's a computer algorithm. In time, uh, the science can create a metaphysical world similar, using that as an analogy. The Bitcoin existing in the not in the physical any longer, but in a metaphysical way. It only exists digitally on the internet. Of other things in our world that right now that exist. This has already happened in video games. So I'm trying to get across to you guys is there's kids out there that'll buy an item on a video game, like a sword, say for instance. They really want this sword because they can kill all the other kids in the video game if they can get this powerful sword of Tantor or something like that. And in real world dollars, it costs like $100. And they're to their mother and they're like, "Mommy, I can have $100 out of your purse. I just need to buy this sword in the game and I can be victorious. So all the other kids will love me." And they really want to buy something that doesn't exist in the real world. It exists only digitally inside a game. But they can buy it for $100. Well, that kind of an idea or concept of metaphysical things existing electronically and digitally only was a concept that 50 years ago nobody would have understood it. But I can use an analogy now to help you understand that there's a lot of things like domain names and all kinds of things that now are only exist digitally and everybody wants more than they want the real tangible things in the world that exist. So gold and silver are now, they exist in the real world as real things. Whereas people are starting to move into this digital what's it world where they're only owning things that have a digital contract. What happens when humans become, they could end up, so if they digitize money, what's going to stop them from digitizing consciousness? I mean, let's face it, science is going a long way and going really fast. Of course, maybe that's a bit of a stretch to digitize consciousness, but I mean, think about it now that they've got AI in and AI starts to become conscious, it's a digital consciousness. And they could sell contracts for that and everything. It's just, we're moving so fast. I'm going to tell you, inventions out there right now. It's like a breakaway, sort of, almost like a breakaway inventions that are happening surrounding the AI right now. And it's going to move faster than we can even keep up. Advances in robotics, I can't even keep up with how quick they're starting to work on now real muscle tissue for these advanced robotics. So they're not using servo motors and stuff so much anymore. Now they've switched over. They're going to start using real muscle tissue and stuff. This is all just moving so fast that it's going to be like a little bit like a breakaway. So the money in society is still going to be moving ahead with the technological advancements. Meanwhile, the rest of society that's being drained, the middle class is being drained, and we're on the verge of some sort of a massive crack up of society itself. That part of society is probably going to be moving backwards. So it's almost like a small segment of society is off to the stars or whatever with Elon Musk, and they're all going on board, and they're on board with this, and they're all moving ahead with technology as fast as lightning. And another segment of society is actually heading in the opposite direction. It creates a dichotomy. Okay, let's continue on. So we're looking at the markets. Talkative today. I got a lot to say today. Bitcoin's at 105,000. So this intangible thing that exists only in the ether is $105,000, and they were a nickel back in 2009. What was that, about 15 years ago? They were a nickel. Now they're 105,000. Yahoo Finance. We're going to take a look now at what the markets did this week. The S&P settled the week at 6101. The Dow Jones settled the week at 44,424. So the markets are up a lot. We're seeing them go up and up and up. The crude oil is at 74.60. You know, Canada supplies a lot of oil for the United States, a lot of energy products. Canada has. Perhaps this is why the United States wants Canada. I'm going to go right out and I'm going to say the largest oil reserve on Earth left. It's 196 billion barrels. Saudi Arabia, I think, was like 260 billion barrels at one time, but they've been pumping from it for like 40 years, and they don't do a survey on it. So I would imagine they've probably pumped a lot of it already. But here in Canada, 196 billion barrels, larger than Venezuela, larger than all of them, is sealed in the tar sands. Enormous oil reserve. And it hasn't been a viable oil reserve all over the years because of the extra cost to get the oil out of the tar sand. That makes it not really all that viable. But when the oil price becomes exceedingly high and oil starts to run out in these other places, this is the big one here in Canada. It's been untapped, really, comparatively speaking, untapped. Whereas places like Saudi, they've been tapped a lot. Venezuela tapped a lot. They're tapping all those. Those are, you know. And so this is one of the biggest oil reserves left in the world here in Canada. And so not only that, the untapped resources that Canada has. I mean, we only got 30 million people, and most of them live by the southern border. And all that up to the north of us is as big as America itself. Is practically all untapped. There's nobody up there. It's all like tundra or whatever. What's underneath all that when you strip the top layer of soil off? What's underneath there? Gold, silver, rare earth minerals, everything you could imagine. Oh, yeah. Now, bonds and rates today. Over the week, we've seen the yields fall. Basically 2 basis points. The 10 years at 4.61 fell 2 basis points. 2.6 basis points in the 30 year at 4.84. And the US dollar index is at 107.47. So we're not going to get any serious movement in the war theaters and in a lot of the things that were happening up until the inauguration of Trump. Things were moving in certain directions. Other countries now are sitting back and they're waiting to see how it all pans out, what's going to happen in the next little while now that Trump's in, before they decide what they're going to do. They're going to let him work out what he's going to do first. Thank you guys for listening. You guys have a great afternoon. Have a great week. I got a show coming up for my members audience, probably early this week, and I got a lot to talk about on a very interesting subject matters. So listen, you guys have a great week this week, and we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.